I nearly lost $100,000 or so because this tenant refused to leave.
Yeah, I think it's a real dangerous territory for rent caps to be introduced.
I feel like it definitely makes sense to me as like a short-term kind of Band-Aid solution. Welcome back to Property Now, where we are on a mission to make you the property pro in your group chat. Today, me and the guys discuss the great housing debate, home ownership and its challenges in Australia. We hope you enjoy.
Do you play the official rules of Monopoly that if you get to a hotel, you
I play
sell it at a
prison
hotel,
rules.
you can't go back down to 4, 3, 2, 1?
Can you go back down? Oh, no, you have to sell the whole thing.
Yeah, so so when you get to a hotel, it's considered as one property. You can't sell it back down to 4 houses.
Well, you
3
can't
houses.
knock down a hotel.
Oh, I
and
thought
then
you
just
could
you
sell
can.
it back down.
Yeah, well, you can,
You
but
can.
you're not.
Stranger things happen.
But
I'm
I-
always the bank when I play Monopoly.
I'm always
And I play
sitting
dirty.
next to the bank, if you know what I'm saying.
I'm picking up what you're putting down.
Just give me 3.
Note to
Hey,
self,
what's that?
don't play Monopoly with these two.
What's that?
We played Monopoly Deal yesterday with the kids. It was good fun.
Oh, that's the
Yeah.
card one, right?
And I like condition the kids to like always pick on Tina.
Yeah.
So Anthony's like, "What
That's
does this card
really
mean?"
sweet.
And I'm like, "That means that you can charge mum $2 rent." And he's like, "Oh, mum, $2." I'm like, "Yes."
Make up your own rules.
Tina hasn't caught on to it
She
yet.
always wins. She's too good. She's
Oh,
great
is
at
that
Monopoly
right?
Deal. Yeah, she's very good at Monopoly Deal somehow. I think she cheats.
That
but-
seems fair enough then. Just pile on Tina.
That's fair, right? Like, demonize her.
Yeah.
I think that's how we should do it. Why
Yeah.
should you? Why should she own all the properties?
I know, right?
You
And
know what I
always
mean?
win.
Oh
Yeah.
my goodness.
It's not
Man,
fair.
man, the younger
not fair that we
generation don't have a
demonise these
chance.
men.
Kids today, my kids are there trying to buy
Yeah.
houses
Nice
and she's
segue.
hoarding them all.
Correct.
I try.
Speaking of demonising
Speaking
landlords,
of demonising landlords,
Chris is just setting me up.
I'm just going to
again.
I
start
am the
calling you
Segway
Chris
king.
the Segway Ferris.
you're the-
Chris Segway.
You're the king of the
You're
Segway.
going to be riding in on the Segway soon.
I can't have a smooth transition from your Segway. It just never works.
It never works.
Every time I'm
I
like,
don't know if I need to sneeze. Or...
Didn't even hear him.
yeah.
We're busy telling
I hear
jokes over
everything.
here.
I don't miss a beat.
100%.
I'm always listening.
How many bunnies have we consumed between the 4 of us?
0.
Oh, no bunnies?
No.
Oh man.
Not any chocolate.
Lot of eggs.
You didn't have any chocolate?
No.
What?
Oh, it's
No,
just me and you, Chris.
the kids have the
Yeah, man.
chocolates.
Get
Once
out.
the
Yeah,
ears
yeah.
start getting taken away,
I gained 2
done.
kilos.
Yeah, right.
Did you?
From the weekend.
It's all right. Lose it quick.
I choose not to weigh
I
myself.
haven't even weighed my... Yeah, I don't
Smart.
know. I
Actually,
choose
cut
not
this
to
because
weigh.
this is probably
You
like
can't
body
lose
shaming.
2 kilos. You can't gain 2 kilos if you don't know you've gained 2 kilos.
That's true.
If a tree falls in the
If you...
The scale April Fool's me. That's what I'm saying.
yes.
All right, gents. Today we are going to chat about home ownership. We're going to go. I mean, that's a big topic, but there's a few little bits and pieces that we're going to speak about more specifically. This topic today came from another listener suggestion, one of our YouTube subscribers, who mentioned that Q&A, which if anyone doesn't know what Q&A is, how do we describe Q&A?
On the ABC.
It's a show on
Yeah.
the ABC. It's a long-standing show on the ABC. Basically, there's a panel,
Yep,
people that know more than us with certain topics.
that's a great way to do it.
Usually someone from government.
Usually government, yeah.
Yep.
And people ask
Industry
questions.
experts,
Yeah,
yeah.
industry experts. People ask questions. Hence.
Yes.
It's supposed to be an unbiased
And they-
panel.
Yep.
Sorry, I shouldn't laugh.
Oh, well, it's usually pretty... like, let's be honest, it's usually very left.
Yeah.
Very left, could you say?
Potentially. I mean,
I
the
don't know.
audience, I would say, is.
The audience is very
Some of
left.
the questions.
Well, thank you, Michael. Yes, that is Q&A. And last week they did a full conversation around home ownership. They talked about home ownership, homelessness, housing supply. On the panel, there were six people. So we had Andrew Bragg, the Shadow Assistant Minister for Home Ownership. We had Max Chandler Mather. Yep.
Sounds right.
Green spokesperson on housing and homelessness, Andrew Lee, Assistant Minister for Competition, Charities and Treasury, Rose Jackson, the New South Wales Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Catherine Little, the Chief Executive for SNAICC, the National Voice for Our Children, and Cameron Murray, who is an economist and author. So on this topic of landlords, it was actually the Max, the Greens spokesperson, who quite passionately, explained how rental caps are incredibly important to be brought in as a solution for this housing crisis. And this was something that the panel kind of debated around. I'm interested to know, what you guys think about rental caps, because currently in Australia, we don't have caps on rental increases. correct?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's Australia-wide.
They've spoken about it in Vic, I believe,
Mm.
but I don't know if anything's been implemented.
Mm.
Yeah.
So do you guys think that, I guess if we're looking at like the housing crisis, do you think that if landlords weren't able to, if rental caps were brought in, do we think that that would sort of help to solve the problem that we're in right now? I guess there's two sides, because it's like, well, there's the renters, but then there's also on the landlord side. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I saw like a discussion over the weekend, because often the reason that, say, a landlord would talk about don't bring rental caps is around letting the market dictate what the rent should be, right? So if I put the property up for rent and there's heaps of demand for it, then I'm going to rent it out for more than compared to if there's not much demand for it, right? So I'm not, driving the rent personally myself.
Yeah, the market is.
Right, like the market is. But then the flip side to that, which I saw on TikTok was, that's an excuse. The market is a decision by you as the landlord. Don't blame it on the market. You're the one making the decision of choosing to increase your rent, right? Even if you can rent it out based on the market, you can still make the decision not to increase it according to the market. You know? So that was a bit interesting. So like I think the demonization thing is all around specific examples that's being highlighted maybe by the media or on socials around poor quality rental properties and certain landlords evicting the tenant when the tenant's not in a capacity, for example, financially able to find something else, or increasing the rent up to a level that's difficult to manage. I don't think every landlord does that, and I don't think every landlord rents out a property that's moldy or doesn't repair the property. So I think there's some sort of it's just one specific section.
Yeah, one of the comments was that landlords can jack up the rent to whatever they want, which isn't true, because there will be a point where people aren't going to pay that price, right?
Correct.
So they're always going to look. Most landlords are probably going to try and get as much as they possibly can, because it is a business for them. Some might be a little bit more lenient if they've had a good tenant. I know myself personally, if I've got a good tenant that's been in the property for 5-6 years, they look after the place like their own. I probably would be happy to be a little bit more lenient, but
yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, I think most landlords are like that. But if they're in a position where, I think what we've seen a lot of recently is rents increased dramatically in recent times, and I think we spoke about this in the podcast before, where all of a sudden, if you can get $100, $200, $300 a week more, we're seeing landlords really take advantage of that and do that. So you're seeing tenants, when it comes to a renewal of their leasing terms, then they're looking at an extra $200-$300 a week, or what have you, to sign on for another 12-month lease. So we're seeing a lot of that lately. So because they can get that price with a different tenant, right?
Yeah.
So they're not jacking it up to a point where we've got empty houses, all over Sydney or all over Melbourne or all over Brisbane or whatever, all over Australia, I should say. They're jacking it up to what they can get, which is unfair for the tenant who's been there for so long, I suppose. It's two sides of every story, right?
Yeah, that's what I think is challenging, right? Like, how do you say it's unfair for the tenant, because that could be unfair for the landlord because their interest rates have gone up to maintain that mortgage on that investment property. Who's it unfair for? And it's hard to, balance it in general terms unless you look at specific situations, because I think about this as the same argument around Woolies and Coles jacking up the prices and taking advantage of consumers.
Yeah.
But at what point does the government come in to say that, hey, for that packet of chips, you can't sell it for that price? You know, if there's real demand for that packet of chips, for that brand, perhaps, that's the free market, right? If there's a lot of government intervention, then that's like, if they're going to intervene for rental, then do you want them to intervene for this? Do you want them to intervene for that? So who can actually set the price of anything if you don't let the market set the price?
Yeah, I think it's a real dangerous territory for rent caps to be introduced.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been on both sides of the coin. I've been a tenant or a renter for a substantial period of time in the past. And there were times where I've been kicked out, where they wanted to sell the property or they wanted to increase rents, and I didn't want to go ahead with that, and decided to leave and go to a different property. But I've also been a landlord where, my first property, which I bought in 2012, where the rent didn't change for about 6 years. It was the same rent for 6 years.
Yeah.
And that's just what it was. But now we have this point where rents are increasing, and there's this unfairness that's come in where, it is the market setting it. I mean, and I understand that people might think it is unfair, but at the end of the day, it is just a supply and demand issue. If there's 100 people wanting to rent that property that the landlord owns, if someone puts an application in for $500 or $800 a week, what's the incentive for that landlord to go to 500? At the end of the day, it's the consumers. So it's the people that they're fighting against, their own kind, or the renters side of things, who are pushing up the rents, not necessarily the landlords.
Yeah.
It's the tenants that are fighting for those same properties to push the rent value up effectively so they can secure that property, that are pushing the property prices up.
We've spoke about this before too. You raise a good point about like 6 years without a change. And I've had tenants that we didn't change for a while. And I've been a tenant as well where it didn't change for a while. But we after COVID, there was a big catch-up period because some rents went down during COVID.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's been a big catch-up period. And that is what is seeming... It's not... I hate using the term unfair because there are two sides and both have a genuine... argument, right? I believe both sides have a genuine argument, but I can see that if I'm spending X amount per week and all of a sudden I need to find an extra $300, that would feel pretty shit.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I mean, you are renting someone else's house.
Yeah.
If the alternative is getting into home ownership, and the argument is there, I can't achieve home ownership. I mean, we're still seeing young people get into homes. We are still seeing it happen. And Jace, you probably see in the finance space all the time, lower deposits. We saw Kirsty from last week's episode still got into property. She's young, earning 80K. So she still managed to break into the property, in her own way. So there is still a way to get into property with lower deposits and whatnot. But there's this unfairness that comes in. At the end of the day, you're renting someone else's asset.
Yeah.
So I think it's really unfair to then say that particular asset, we're going to cap the total revenue that you can make off that particular asset. I mean, are governments then going to go into businesses and say you can't charge X amount? Are they going to go into the banks and say you got to cap?
That's exactly what you're saying. Yeah.
Are they going to go into the supermarkets and say you need to cap the price of milk?
But
where does it end?
It de-incentivizes investors, right? So why would I invest in property when I'm capped?
But I think that's the whole point, right? So if they can achieve that and de-incentivize investors, I think that's their whole plan, and that's the idea, so that someone doesn't go out and buy 5 investment properties because of what's in place at the moment that they can take advantage of with the negative gearing.
But they're going to end up with less rental properties out there, right? So housing supply is a major issue. If there's less investors buying properties, there's less investment properties, there's less rentals for these people to rent.
The counter to that is they say, well, those people who would have rented that property can buy that property.
Can they though? If prices stay the way they are, they're not going to drop dramatically enough. And then on the flip side, we've spoken about housing supply and builders and construction being at all-time lows. So they're not building more houses. They're not going to have more houses to rent. It actually, I believe that a cap actually causes more problems on the flip side than it could resolve on this issue.
I feel like it definitely makes sense to me as a short-term kind of band-aid solution of it will definitely alleviate pressure from renters who are facing increasing rents and aren't in a position, or maybe just don't want to move into property ownership themselves. But I think it was the Minister for what was her title? Sorry, Minister for Housing and Homelessness, Rose Jackson. She brought up a good point as well around the need for more protection for renters. So things like extended lease options, eviction safeguards, and other sort of protections, I guess, that could be brought into place or improved upon to safeguard renters. Because rental caps is one thing, but I think I agree. And I don't own an investment property. I'm a renter, but I can understand for someone that owns an investment property. To me, if I did, and I was told, you can't increase your rent above this point, I'm like, well, hang on, my interest repayments are going up. I'm facing financial difficulties as well in paying for this property. So who are you to say I can't keep increasing rent as the market
safeguards
changes?
I really like. I think the safeguards definitely should be brought in place.
Too.
I mean,
because you hear terrible stories about
look, I've seen scenarios where someone's renting a property, the landlord said, I want to sell this property. and they kick the tenant out, and then they change their mind that they don't want to sell that property anymore,
Mm.
Oh,
and then
wow.
they put it back on market for rent.
Mm.
Oh, wow.
And so that tenant who's had to uproot their life because the landlord said they wanted to sell it and they had to vacate the property,
Yeah.
they had to find a new property, probably paying more, but then that's just a huge issue. And it's instability in their life, their financial
Yeah.
life as well.
And I
Yeah,
think
the
especially
mental
the
strain
notice
of
they
that.
get, right? Like how much notice you have
Mm.
when the landlord wants to sell
Yeah.
the property and you need to go, and especially with how tight the rental market is, I think people are finding it really difficult logistically to go find another property
Yeah.
to rent.
Yeah.
You still have to
absolutely.
work.
There's so much
Yeah,
demand.
it's not like you're looking around it Monday to Sunday.
Look,
Mm.
flip side though, I've spoken about this in the podcast before, where I've been in a situation where I was selling a property, gave the tenants more than the notice required, and they still wouldn't leave. Like, we ended up having to go to tribunal to sort that out, to the point where I almost lost a deposit on the property I was buying. The reason I was selling that
Yeah.
property was to buy
Yeah.
a place to live.
Yeah.
So I nearly lost, $100,000 or so, because this tenant refused to leave, and because they had rights.
Yeah.
But it went to tribunal. Turns out I gave them more than sufficient notice.
Yeah.
They just weren't looking around, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, right.
So I think there is, in terms of notice, those things are kind of there. Like, it's not easy to evict a tenant, or as easy as people think. I don't think that's a massive issue. I think what we should be talking about is the length of tenancy as well. So as a landlord, you want to have people there, good people in your home, as long as possible. But most tenants don't discuss more than a 12-month lease, because that's what the agent sort of advises. And most tenants would say, hey, I want stability. I want to be here. Maybe I've got kids. I want them to go to school in this area. So, like, will you be open to 18 months, 24 months? Would you be open to longer term leases?
Yeah.
I think longer term leases is something we should be considering, because as a tenant, if you're faced with having to move every 12 months, that's shit.
Oh,
Right.
yeah.
And you've done it, right, Zaz?
Oh my God, I've moved 11 times in 9 years.
So moving, and the cost of moving adds to, the extra
Financial
rent.
pressure.
There's
Yeah.
so much
Yeah.
pressure.
Yeah.
But if hey, look, let's sign up for 24 months. Let's sign up for 36 months. I'm a good tenant. We've got a good track record. Let's agree that the rent can go up $10, $20 a week after every 12 months or something like that.
Yeah.
I think that's something that both parties would be quite happy with.
Yeah. And that's a great idea, because that's what they do for commercial properties.
Exactly.
So when you're renting a shop front or you're renting a warehouse, you don't typically go by 12-month
No.
intervals.
Yeah.
You want that long-term stability, is that
As a business.
you sign up for 3 years
Yeah.
and you have an option, or you have a priority to extend, as opposed to competing with someone else, as long as the terms are agreed on.
So this
Yeah.
this
It's like
lady on
commercial
the
leases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like
Exactly
commercial
right.
leases, the increases, if it's a 5-year lease, they're
Yeah.
baked in. Like it
Yeah,
could,
they're
be, it
baked
could be
in.
CPI, or they could agree to
That's
3%,
right.
for
That's right.
example. So they could be baked into
So
the
that's
actual.
actually a pretty cool solution.
Thanks, man.
Yeah.
The lady on Q&A, the lady who asked the question on Q&A, she actually said, this is my business.
Yeah.
Like, I'm a landlord. This is my business. So as a business owner, don't you want the stability of like a longer term lease?
Yeah, but that's just how you frame that. Well, sorry, not you. How she framed that is just so trigger.
It is a trigger.
it's
of
like,
course it is. That's why she blew up on
These
TikTok.
houses are my business. These people that live like that's
It's very
the problem.
cold.
It's
Very
very, it's
cold.
very cold, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
because if owning property is your business, then the people that live there are just a commodity,
Yeah.
and that's a problem.
Well, and it goes back to that point that we've discussed around, like, housing is a basic human right. Like,
Yeah.
having shelter, having stability is
Yeah.
a basic human right. But this woman on Q&A
And, like,
had the
well
complete
done to Q&A,
opposite
like,
opinion.
They found like a lot of
They
Golden
found
nugget.
the right person.
are
yeah.
landlords, and I know a
Yeah.
lot of landlords that are not like that,
Yeah.
right? So they found they obviously done very well in the pre-screening.
And they would have
Who's
been
asked
listed
that
the help
question?
of
She
producers
demonised
from
herself.
maths.
Yes.
Right? That's
Yes.
what I reckon.
How good is maths?
Man,
We should
yeah.
do an episode on maths next week.
Done.
But
Yeah.
look, but it is. Let's be honest though, it is a business. If you're a landlord, you're making money from it, right? But that doesn't mean like customer service is dead. If my parents owned small businesses my whole life. They were successful because customer service was number one. So if you're a landlord and you every year you buy new light bulbs and you like whatever, and you're good to your tenants, right? Then they're not a commodity. Like they're your most important customer in a way, right? So you need
Are
to look
landlords
after
doing
them.
that? I've personally
Some
never
do.
had a landlord.
Yeah, look,
but
some do.
Yeah, 100%, man. I think they
Yeah.
would.
I've
yeah,
been
like
unlucky.
proactively check out, hey, is there anything wrong with the property? You know, things that need to be fixed, because that's how you should, you know, approach it. Or you might have a really good property manager.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think a lot of landlords don't even know the issues that's happening in their investment properties
Mm.
because it's stopped at the property manager side, right?
Yeah, correct.
When one property manager is managing 200 properties,
Yeah.
it's pretty full on as
Customer
well.
service is lacking.
Correct.
I think
Well, there is
correct.
no customer.
That is an issue because
Yeah.
if you look at real estate agents, who's the property manager typically
Mm.
in the agency? It's the juniors.
Yeah,
Right? They're not.
totally.
They're learning how to sell. They're not selling yet.
Yeah.
They're managing the properties. So customer service at that level is probably low. I won't generalize.
Yeah.
But it's most likely to be a low level.
Well, that's exactly right, because you see on TikTok and see some funny articles is that the real estate agent's attitude, you know, if you're buying a property, you know, their attitude is much better versus if you're looking to rent a property.
Yeah.
So, you know, that's commonplace everywhere. So,
So better property managers, longer term leases. We don't want rental caps, I'm assuming, on this panel.
well,
Well, no,
I don't have a firm opinion either way. Like, I
Yeah.
feel like it is an interesting idea, but I'm not convinced
don't know
that
it will
it's like a
work.
good long-term
Yeah.
solution. I feel like it's just another, like, it will fix problems for renters in the short term, but what are the flow-on effects?
Yeah.
I always kind of think.
yeah, for me, it's just not consistent with everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah, put a rental cap. You know, why don't you put a cap on petrol?
Mm.
Yeah.
Because that costs a lot of money too. Right? Why don't you
That would
tell
be
the
great.
Well,
corporations that you can only charge this amount for
Yeah.
petrol?
That's the problem. Where does it end?
Where do you
Right.
stop?
Because the argument for petrol is it's the market. You know,
Mm.
oil
Well-
this week is this price. So
I mean,
petrol's
half of it
$2.50.
is taxes that are built in from,
Right.
from government. So,
Yeah.
so they're not going to cap that. But I mean, like the business side of things, I mean, capping rents, I think it could definitely be what you're saying, Michael. It could be tied to CPI increase. So if someone's in a lease
Yeah.
already, it could be tied to CPI increases or whatever the inflation rate is. But if someone's outside a lease, I think if it's outside of a lease and you're looking for a new tenant, it's completely should be dictated by the market.
100%.
I don't think we should be meddling with that from a government perspective.
100%.
Because that's, I mean, you're ruining the whole element of a free market,
Yeah.
and you know, you're not giving certainty to people that wanting to invest into property who do provide rental stock into the market.
Yeah.
So then I think
Yeah.
that's an issue. And then it comes back to what Jason's saying, like where does it stop?
Yeah.
Because I think the topic is around social responsibility, though. And I think they're directing it to the wrong people. I feel that the tenants are saying that the landlords should have more social responsibility,
Mm.
right? Yes, this is your business. It's an investment, but you should take on the burden of social responsibility and address this issue that people are facing homelessness, people can't afford the rent. Should you increase the rent, even if the market allows you
Yeah.
to do
Yeah.
that,
Mm.
right? But I think, man, that should be directed at the government.
Yeah, as nice
Yeah.
as nice as that sounds,
Yeah.
that's not the landlord's responsibility.
No.
That's
Well,
right.
Mum and dad, property investor who owns one property,
Yeah.
they're not responsible for this wider
Correct.
macro
100%.
Mm.
100%.
You know, they got one.
Yeah,
They got their one
that's
investment
right,
property.
that's right.
What is it? 70.
70% or 71%
Yeah.
own one investment property, and a lot of them that own one investment property are usually your blue collar workers or your essential workers. It's the ones that own 6 or 7 investment
They're not flying
properties
first class.
are the people earning a lot of
eating
money.
caviar. They got
No.
their one property. That's probably part of their retirement plan, or it's part of their. You know,
100%. Yeah, so
So-
I think this is misdirected. You know, so it's like pitting the landlord against the tenant.
Yeah.
Is a distraction from the problems that the government need to address
Yeah,
around
correct.
Yeah.
supply, around immigration.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Let's probably just let the landlords and tenants fight it out,
Battle it out.
while the government just hide behind
Well, if
that
they're
fight, right?
looking at each other, they're not looking at us, right?
Correct.
So that makes sense. Property Now is brought to you by the team at Coposit, the new way to property. If you'd like to learn more about Coposit and what we do, head to coposit.com.au. Guys, I want to get on to the next topic as well. This is another really interesting one because my opinion changed after watching Q&A and hearing the discussion. I actually kind of, I flipped and flopped from one side of the fence to the other. So this one is all about super for first homes. So the panel discussed, and it was Andrew Bragg, who is the Shadow Assistant Minister for Home Ownership, was talking about how first home buyers should be able to access superannuation to purchase a first home. And again, the panel had a range of different opinions on whether or not this should be, an option for first home buyers. But I won't reveal too much, because I am, genuinely just curious as, what is your stance from each of you on should we be able to use super to purchase your first home?
I'd love to know, because you said you flipped and flopped. We had an episode about this while you were away, where the three of us gave extensive opinions. So they can go, the listeners can go back and listen to us talk for like 40 minutes about it. But yeah, so you flipped and flopped, Saz?
Yeah, well, I guess I initially thought, this money, like the money that is sitting in my super, it's my money. And if I want to use it now to help me get on the property ladder, then I should be able to do that. At the same time, I don't know how much people think that, a 20-something has in their super, but it would not make a difference for me if I could use 100% of my super. It wouldn't be the difference between me being able to buy property or not, because my issue is borrowing capacity. My issue isn't deposit right now. And I think they opened it up to, Q&A did a poll as well on, whether first home buyers should be able to use super, and 70% of respondents said no. So it's definitely the vast majority that think no. And again, I feel like I say this a lot, but I think it's just kind of another slap a Band-Aid on it, because if I use my super now, then I have no super that I've been, building up for a decade.
It feels like it's just another government response to say, yep, there's a bucket of money sitting here. How can we use this bucket? Let's use it. And if we're talking somewhere, let's talk about someone that's 26 and under, right? They've they've been at school. They might have been studying, because we know everyone's getting a uni degree. So they might be studying for 2 or 3 years, sometimes 4 years, even longer. So how much super do they even have saved?
Yeah, I would love to know.
Up to a 25 to 26-year-old. If they've been working part-time somewhere, or even if they have been working full-time,
it's
it's
probably
18-year-old.
10, 12 grand. That's just a random guess. But I'm trying to think about how much super
even
I
if it's 40 grand that they've got in super, if they're not making salary sacrifice, how much does that go towards a deposit? Particularly if you're looking in some of these capital city areas, or these metro areas even. How much does that actually help?
Yeah.
On the first side. And the second side is if they could access that and they're still not earning that higher income, then, the housing affordability side of things is just not there. The serviceability of the potential mortgage to buy a property is just not there.
Exactly.
So I think using super is probably not really a solution in any case.
No. And then I think it was Cameron Murray, the economist who was on the panel, that brought up the point of, I need to look up what the stat was exactly, or the quote, but it was something around how home ownership is the biggest defining factor for when you hit retirement, of whether you're going to have financial security in retirement or not. So he was sort of saying, well, yeah, you should, if your super can help you buy property now, do it, because you'll be far better off in retirement without your super, or with less super, but being a property owner, which I thought that sounded quite logical. Yeah,
but if it's just if you own that property outright and then you're retired, then you can't liquefy those dollars. You need to sell that property to have the money to continue to live in your retirement.
Yeah, but I guess you have that option, right? You have an asset that you can sell for. Then you got to live cash.
Where are you going to live?
Rent.
So this is the thing, right? So it's, again, like you said, Zaz, it's Band-Aid solution.
Yeah.
Super is there because as we always say, or as I always say, there's $10 in my pocket, I'm going to spend it. If we are limited access to that super, then it's sort of helping us, it's helping the majority of us in the future. If we're able to access that now, there's probably an opportunity cost to accessing it now instead of leaving it there, building up over time as well. So again, I don't know the exact figures on what that could be.
Yeah.
But we saw people, and we've spoken about this, Chris, you mentioned this all the time, during COVID, people taking out their 10K and buying jet skis.
Well, that's what I mean though. The government allowed, I had a bunch of friends in COVID that pulled 10K out of their super for stupid shit. Yeah.
They probably did it twice, right?
Yeah, I guess so. And I was sitting there going, what are you idiots doing? But so you could do that, but you can't use it to buy property? That seems stupid to me. You should be able, if you can pull out cash to spend on a holiday or like refurnish your rental. Like,
I think it was used like
a lot of people
as
used
an
it-
emergency excuse during COVID.
yeah,
right?
but I had friends that totally abused that and regretted it and were like, oh, damn it, I wish I didn't do that because I was doing okay.
Well,
I
It's sitting nice and pretty in the inflation
Yeah.
numbers now.
100%. Yeah, and the opportunity cost, for that 10K that they spent on a holiday,
Mm.
they probably missed, $100,000 in the lifetime of that accumulating. So it's it's actually very dangerous because you need to trust that we're going to all use it the right way, and it is going to be the beneficial decision for the future, and it's hard to kind of do that.
Yeah.
What do you think, Jace?
Oh, I think we talked about this last episode. Yeah. For me, being a bit cynical with the coalition is around, again, Band-Aid solution, totally agree with that. How do we come up with something different that's not the help to buy, that's not a rental cap, that's not removing negative gearing and cancelling capital gains discounts that the Liberal Party introduced. So let's think of an idea. Why don't we let people use their super? Because that's a quick fix, because we
Yeah.
don't have to address the immigration problem with that. We don't have to address the lack of supply, the fact that we're not building enough houses or social housing, right? That's going to get some popularity and differentiate our policies against what Labor's proposing, what the Greens proposing. So that's what we're going to do, right? Because they had that idea before. So they're just rehashing it. It's nothing new.
It's like the last bucket of cash that we can tap.
100%.
Like, what happens after that?
100%.
I just think we're continuing down this talk fest path
Yeah.
where we just keep all sides of politics, and even now the tenants and the landlords involved. We're just in this continuous talk fest, and nothing's getting done
Yeah.
to fix the problem.
Yeah.
Like we're even seeing, a really easy solution. And we talked about this in the last episode to help with the rental crisis in the very short term is to look at migration numbers, and that will help on the rental side. And that hasn't been done. Like some of these real basic items, like properties is not going to be fixed overnight. There needs to be a long-term view to fix any housing crisis, whether it's on the rental side or the home ownership side. So, these little things that we can do are not being done,
Yeah.
but the talk fest and the lack of action continues to happen.
Yeah. The talk should be around supply. How do we get more houses? How are there less people needing those more houses, right? But we're talking about, giving people a quick hit, a quick fix, like Band-Aid solution. Like it's the best description for it. Because the Band-Aid solution doesn't fix anything in the long term. We need more houses to be built.
Yeah.
We need to be able to house the people that are already here that are coming in. And so we should be talking about how to invigorate construction. There's so much interesting discussion. I was reading an article, and this is slightly related, but it's more about the housing supply issue, where the article was about the Aerotropolis out at Badgerys Creek, the second airport in Sydney, and the builders there's like thousands of like workers and builders on site in Badgerys Creek, and they were saying once Badgerys Creek is complete, they can all go back to residential housing. So there's a lot of people like not building properties. This is the discussion we should be having. How do we build more? How do we incentivize builders to build homes? Not how do we get the landlord to not charge an extra $100 rent? Like or should we be, being able to use our super? Like it's just
a smoke
like
screen. It's just a
ridiculous.
distraction.
Round and it
From
goes
actual
round and round
real
in
issues.
circles.
Yeah, that's right. It goes round and round because if you look at if you do a quick Google search about housing affordability, you'll see articles from 2013 talking about the same thing.
Yep.
You'll see articles from 2008 talking about the same thing, 2006 talking about the same thing.
Yeah.
So it's only reached the boiling point now because of where the rental crisis is at.
Yeah.
But it's always been the same thing, that housing is not affordable for first home buyers, not building enough, right? There's too many delays in terms of approvals, right? It's not being managed. No one's coming in with new policies. No one's doing tax reform, right? So they've done research, the Henry tax reform, where they recommended doing things like, pulling back on negative gearing, not getting rid of it, but don't let it, for example, offset your personal income. Maybe just let it offset the income of future rental properties. Maybe pull back on capital gains a bit, so forth, right? But it's never put in place. But there's heaps of research, right? I think Chris has mentioned there's all these, committees and stuff doing research, coming out with advice, but government after government after government ignore it.
Yeah.
Because it's too hard to do tax reform and take action to address the problem. And now
Piss
it's
too many people off.
exactly right. And
It's not popular.
correct, right? And now you have this issue that's been accumulating or building up over the last 20 years.
The politics side of things, they'll do whatever is popular.
Yeah.
That may not necessarily be what's right for the community. Whatever's popular, and they're going to get them re-elected. And I think with 3 to 4 year windows where people are elected, I don't think that's enough to actually make meaningful change.
Yeah.
So I think that actually, this is another side topic, but the 3 to 4 year period where people are elected in government is not long enough to affect proper change. I mean, if you were running a business and you had a fixed term, you knew you had 3 years to get a business up and running, and that was it. No one would start a business. Like it just wouldn't happen.
You see it in business, CEOs that are there for 5 years, and then they're not worried about how the business is going once they're gone. They're worried about how it went while they were there.
That's right.
You know, it's the same with prime ministers.
Right, so that's why they have Band-Aid solutions as well when they restructure. You know,
They have Band-Aid solutions, or they throw money at something.
Correct.
And that's like they're not the solutions
Yeah.
to be able to put forward.
Well, and maybe that's, I mean, I know we talk about, you mentioned before that we've got landlords and renters fighting, and like there's always, you know, this, you see on social media, these hot debates going on between, you know, disgruntled members of the public on either side. I don't know, maybe part of it, as frustrating as it is, part of it is a good thing, because maybe we see that what will become popular is something that is more in favour of, you know, the majority. Like if there's these strong opinions, or if people are learning more about how these government policies impact them, whether they are a landlord or a renter or, you know, anything in between, maybe we will see a shift in what is popular. Maybe politicians will start paying attention. I think they are paying attention.
Well, I think it is good, the discussion. And it's good that we're seeing both sides, but I think it's misdirected. It's misguided.
Yeah.
It shouldn't be directed at each other. It should be directed at government.
They should be on the same side.
Well, it should be directed at government. I mean, at the end of the day, if
that's what we're
landlords
missing.
are being demonised and tenants don't have a place to live, I think that actually should be squarely placed on government.
Redirect the
that's
focus.
where the focus should be on government to cause some change.
That's the whole purpose why you
that.
have a government.
Yeah.
So that people don't just have free reign.
Correct.
Right? And you have a very lopsided situation. That's why the government needs to intervene or do something about it with policies. Yeah.
Well, guys, I think that's a great point to end on.
Yeah.
Another fantastic discussion. We didn't get through the whole Q&A episode because, as you know, we love to yabber on. But if anyone who is listening hasn't watched it, I would recommend, if you're interested in learning more about these topics we discussed, they also talk about Banker Mum and Dad and a bunch of other really interesting topics that we chat about on the podcast a lot. So you can check that out online. And we will, of course, put the links to all the segments we talked about in the show notes as well. Thank you, guys.
Cool.
Thank
you.
Yeah.
The Property Now podcast offers opinions on Australian property news for informational and entertainment purposes only, and they are general in nature. It does not take into account your objectives, financial situation, or needs. It does not constitute professional advice. Always seek expert guidance before making any property-related decisions.